Hey, thanks for clicking on my video. Seb Heslow here, and today we are going to be overclocking this EVGA 1060 graphics card for Ethereum mining. So let me just put you down here. So first thing, let's open up MSI Afterburner. And the very first thing I always do is I take the fan speed off of auto and I just put that at 80%. And now let's just get our miner up and running. So I'm going to be using T-Rex miner for this. It's just my personal preference. I don't think it matters very much. Just when it comes to like testing out overclocks at least. And while T-Rex is starting up, I'm going to be talking about the three things that you need to keep in mind when overclocking for Ethereum mining. So the first thing is that overclocking is done at your own risk. You know, we're pushing these cards to a place where they're not meant to be, you know, according to the manufacturer. So just be aware of that, and you're doing this at your own risk. The second thing is that the numbers, the overclocking numbers that I find today that works for me might not necessarily work for you, even though you might have the exact same version of the exact same card, just due to individual differences in the cards themselves. So just keep that in mind. The numbers that work for me here today might not work for you, even if you have the same card. And the third thing I want you to keep in mind today is that when I overclock, I just try to find the highest hash rate I can possibly find, where it's still stable and doesn't crash or get rejected shares. For you, it might be different. You might want, you know, the highest efficiency on your card. So like the most mega hash per watt, and that's up to you. But so with that said, let's get to overclocking. Alright, so T-Rex is running and it seems to have stabilized around 20.0809-ish mega hash per second. So the very first thing that I always do when I start to overclock cards is I just take the memory clock and I slam it all the way down. And I apply that just to see what happens. Yeah, so I can see we're already starting to lose some hashing power there. So I'm gonna put that back to 0. Apply that, and then I'm just gonna let it settle back at where it was before, which was at 20.08 mega hash a second. Alright, so we're back at around 20 mega hash a second. So now I'm just gonna do the exact same thing, but with our core clock instead. So I'm pulling that all the way down to -400, and let's just see what happens then. Alright, so it seems that we barely lost any hash rate doing that actually. It's still at just above 20 mega hash a second. So what I'm gonna do is, for now, I'm gonna leave the core clock at -400, and I'm just gonna start pushing the memory clock up. So I'm gonna start by giving it, say, 250. So what I usually do is I do one big jump to begin with, and then I do smaller incremental jumps from there. So plus 250 on our memory clock, apply that, and now let's let that settle, and we'll see where it ends up. Alright, so we seem to have settled at around 21.3 mega hash a second. So I'm actually feeling brave. We're gonna do one more big jump. So I'm gonna put plus 500 on our memory clock, apply that, and let's see what happens. Alright, so it's settled at around 21.3-ish mega hash. So not much happened there, even though it took quite a big step on the memory clock. So what I'm going to do now is I'm gonna put the core clock back to 0, so going from -400 back to 0, and I'm just gonna see if that does anything now. I have a sneaking suspicion that because we've started to push our memory clock now, we can't keep our core clock down there at -400 anymore. Alright, so we've settled at around 23 mega hash a second, so I'm gonna start pushing our memory clock up again. So let's do plus another 100, so that's plus 600 on our memory clock. I'm gonna apply that and see what happens. Yeah, our hash rate's already going up, 23.12 now. Let's see where it settles. Alright, so we seem to have settled at 23.58 megahash a second, so I'm gonna push our memory clock another 100. So let's do 700 on the memory clock, apply that, and let's see where that brings us. Alright, so we've settled at around 24.11 megahash a second now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start doing smaller jumps now, because we're getting pretty far up there on the memory clock. So I'm gonna do 750 now, so that's a jump of plus another 50. Apply that. Ooh, and we've got a crash. That was a pretty hard crash, guys. Okay, so let's start by going back to 700 on our memory clock. Apply that. You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna close the miner, first of all. We're gonna close MSI Afterburner. We're gonna relaunch MSI Afterburner, and let's start our miner back up. So what I'm gonna do now, after the miner has settled, is I'm gonna leave the memory clock and I'm gonna push the core clock. So I'll do one big jump up to plus 100. Apply that, and I'm just gonna see if that changes anything at all. Okay, so it seems that didn't do very much of anything, so I've left the core clock at plus 100, just because. And let's just jump into our power limit, shall we? So right now we're pulling just under 140 watts at the wall. So let's start by going down to 90% power limit, and let's see where that gets us. And we're at around 24.13 megahash a second. Alright, so now we're at 128 watts at the wall, and we're still getting 24.11 megahash a second. So I'm gonna push the power limit down by another 10%, so down to 80%. And that brought us down to around 116 watts at the wall, 115. And let's just see what happens to our hash rate. Alright, so we lost a slight bit of hash rate there. We're down to 23.94 megahash a second, still at around 116-ish watts at the wall. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna put the power limit at 85%, and I'm gonna be happy there. Hey, so I was just editing this video and I realized I forgot to mention that, of course, after you've overclocked your card and you're happy with your settings, what you should always do is, just let it run on those settings for, a day, 2 days, a week, and just look for, is it getting the odd rejected share here and there? Is it crashing? And then adjust your settings down as applicable to that. And also, do you have a version of this card? If so, please leave your overclocking settings down in the comments, and we could sort of build up a little database of, overclock settings. So that's it. Now back to the rest of the video. So yeah, that's it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. If you wouldn't mind giving the video one of these, I'd really appreciate it. And as well, please subscribe to the channel. I got a lot more mining content coming up. But until then, thanks for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. Goodbye. Bye bye bye.